समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
So the tariff sledgehammer has come from Trump. He has imposed a further 25% by way of secondary tariffs on all imports from India. 25%, over 25% already imposed. So the initial fact that emerges is that once your products have been put under 25% tariff, which is higher than the tariffs put against any competitor for those products, you've been tariffed out of the market. Tariffed out of the market, you can say, but you want to be halfway funny, you can say tariffed out of the market. So 25 to 50, it's all right, you're already out of the market. He can make it 100% tomorrow, he can make it 200% tomorrow. Those will all be headlines for the moment. It doesn't affect you. Anything more than 25-30% might, because what is 25% also, if you want to understand trade, it's not just 25%, because almost everything already has a tiny tariff ranging from say 1.2%, 1.3%, in some cases to about 6%. That is the MFN tariff rate, or the most favored nation tariff rate. When two countries call themselves each other most favored nation, remember that tamasha went on between India and Pakistan, that India had called Pakistan most favored nation. That is how it was under WTO. When you said, I will have open trade with the other country, Pakistan was not willing to do that, because in the Urdu press in Pakistan, they said, ye India ko यारों का यार कैसे कहेगा. So the Urdu press in Pakistan translated most favored nation as यारों का यार. It is just a term in trade law. So everything is an MFN tariff, small tariff. So I will give you some data. I will not give you comprehensive and total data, but some data which is indicative to show you how what is 50% may actually be 51.2%, 51.7%, and so on and so forth. However, we also have to remember the total size of our trade. The total size of our trade are goods and merchandise trade. That's important, because I keep saying all the time that the largest element in our trade with the US is services. In fact, US economy itself is now 86% services, right? Outside of the farm sector in US, almost 80% people are employed in services. Modern economies are service economies. Now, leaders in modern economies who've made a lot of success with service economies want to do manufacturing. There is a nostalgia about manufacturing in a country like the US, which has done very well with services, while at the same time parking its manufacturing overseas. Country like India needs to create jobs, so India needs to bring in manufacturing to add to its strength of services. Services are not subject to tariffs, at least not yet. Maybe Trump will discover something at some point, not right now. And also on services, India and the US have about the same trade balance. So there is no deficit on either side, nothing significant on either side. Our goods and merchandise trade, last year our trade went up about 8.9% or 9%, let's round it off. Our exports to the US was $86.5 billion. US's exports to India, or India's exports from the US, were $45.6 billion. What this means is a $40 billion deficit for the US. For India, the US is the country with which we have the biggest trade surplus. We have the biggest trade surplus with the US. We have the biggest trade deficit with China, which, irony of ironies, has now issued statements saying that they defend India's sovereignty, that India has a sovereign right to buy what it wants from where, and these US tariffs against India are wrong, etc., etc. I mean, my facetious suggestion: why doesn't China buy the surplus shrimp that India will now have? Because this shrimp that India sells to America, which is worth more than $2 billion, which involves the jobs of so many thousands of fishermen, and particularly in this case fisher women, they will be the ones suffering because they will not be able to handle this 50+% tariff blow now. Why don't the Chinese buy this and show solidarity? Anyway, that's how big powers work, and that's how nations work. I see this more as a case of China trolling India, and both trolling India and the US in this sense, because both had been claiming to be strategic partners to balance China. So if the two of them are fighting, what will the Chinese do? They'll say, bring out the popcorn. And that is what they are doing right now and watching the fun. Now, if you see this $85.6 billion, the immediate fear, and that was my fear also because I don't know much about trade. In fact, I don't know much about many of the things I talk about in Cut the Clutter. And that's the reason I stay invested in Cut the Clutter, because it makes me read, it makes me understand things that I don't know. So it keeps me curious. So trade is the new thing. I've also been helped by our reporter, Keshav Padmanabhan, who covers foreign affairs and who's also been reading up on trade. Please read his story. It has some very interesting details. It's on your screens. I will also share a link with you. And also, later on, I'll have him join in to explain some intricacies of this Trump order. The important thing, however, let me not miss the point, is $86.5 billion worth of exports. Out of this, at least about 30 to 35%. Some experts tell me even more, but I don't know. At least 30%. Let's do a negotiation between us and arrive at a mean figure. Say about 35% is not subject to tariffs. It's not subject to tariffs because it's exempted. You can say temporarily exempted. So I will not read out a definitive list to you, but I will tell you a few things which are exempted and a few things with the tariff rates. And this data is from GTRI. So see the data from there. I think Bloomberg has also done a chart based on this data today. So if you see what will have the biggest hit: diamond, gold, gems and jewelry. That is more than $10 billion. More than $10 billion. It had a 2.1% MFN tariff already, chota tariff already. It has now gone to 52.1%. Again, remember, the net export in this case, I don't know the data. I can only guess the net export in this case will be about 3 billion, 3.5 billion, because these gems, most of these gems and gold would have been imported from outside, because India does not produce any gold. India has very little silver, and India also doesn't produce that many gems. So most of these are imported, then these are value added and then exported. This has been hit with 52.1%. The other big one, now depending on how you see it, it's about $10 billion. Some data tells you about last year, $12.7 billion. That might also be a case of what you add in pharma, because there is pharma, there is also medical equipment, there is simple things like surgical consumables, gauges, bandages, etc., etc. India makes a lot of that. That is between 10 to 12 billion dollars. That's a very big import. That right now is exempted. Pharma is exempted. Also, Trump is saying, and this is not India specific, Trump is saying that he's going to soon start putting tariff on pharma, taking it up to 250% over time, so that people are forced to come to America and manufacture there. Those things will need time. You can't go and switch on and off and say, hey, come on, I've rented this space. Next month, I'm starting to make this antibiotic here. Those things will take time. So when that happens, we will know, but that will then apply to everybody. And the immediate effect of that will be that pharmaceutical prices in America will going up. Trump has just now written to 14 or is it 17 big pharma manufacturers in the US, asking them to reduce prices, because that's a big issue. The pharmaceutical industry in the US really profiteers. That said, this is one area which right now has protection. I've seen some headlines on some TV channels and some newspapers saying this will be destructive of pharma industry, not yet. It doesn't help anybody to exaggerate anything. If you just want to see how important the US is for India's exports in some of these areas, for diamonds, gold, jewelry, etc., the US accounts for 40% of all of India's exports anywhere in the world. Why don't the Chinese buy some of it? Pharmaceuticals, almost 40% of all our exports to the rest of the world. Then you have other important elements. For example, you have shrimp. Shrimp is over $2 billion. That involves a lot of jobs in India. At 50% duties, customs duties or tariffs, Indian shrimp is not going to survive the American market. Then there are carpets. Now you might say $1.2 billion, right? It's not that much money given the overall size of exports, 85.6, but $1.2 billion of carpets. Think of how many working class jobs will that involve in Varanasi, Bhadoi, Agra, Panipat, Coimbatore, Tirupur, places like that. And then there is also garments and apparel, which involve a lot of jobs. So knitted apparel is about $2.7 billion. This will now get 63.9% tariff. Woven garments, 60.3% tariff, also $2.7 billion. You can imagine how many jobs, again, how many tens of thousands of jobs, I would say hundreds of thousands of jobs will be lost if these exports are lost. That is the real issue here. Then you have other areas which are exempted. Now, the largest single item of exports from India to the US is smartphones, basically Apple iPhones. Now, this was a deal with Tim Cook, Apple, to manufacture in India as part of their China Plus One policy. Now, this is exempt from taxation. You might say temporarily exempt, because in Trump era, you have to say everything is temporary, right? But hopefully, Tim Cook has gone. You might have seen the pictures. He's presented an Apple logo, a memento from Apple on a 24-karat gold slab, as he put out. It's really like a supplicant going to a feudal overlord. That's how the situation is in Washington right now. So hopefully that business will be protected. In any case, that's part of a different arrangement. It's like the Americans manufacturing it here and taking it away. That itself is worth about $11 billion. In fact, of all the Apple iPhones that India exports, the US accounts for 44%. That's a very important element, and that is exempt. So pharma is exempt, smartphones are exempt. Then irony of ironies, all petroleum goods are exempt. These are petroleum goods that come out of Indian refineries. Now, when they come out of Indian refineries, there is no way of knowing which crude have they come out of. They might have come out of the Russian crude, which is the source of Trump's supposed anger right now, although I think that's an excuse. He's playing a power game, not with India, but with Putin, and we are caught up in that. That's an analytical point. We will leave that aside. The fact is that any petroleum and energy goods produced in India are also exempt from taxes. So all of these then add up to about 30 to 35%. All the rest, carpets, furniture and beddings, vehicles and vehicle parts go to 26% now. Organic chemicals go to 54% because they already had 4%. Steel, aluminium and copper, they had already some duty put in. They've now gone to 51.7%. Now machinery and appliances, they've gone to 51.3%. All of these will be priced out of the American market. Now, the Prime Minister spoke this morning. He talked about his commitment to protect the Indian farmer, fishermen and women, also Indian dairy, from any foreign pressures to open up and to expose them to unfair competition. That's a good point. No Indian Prime Minister can allow that. However, at the same time, India and the US already have a booming agricultural trade. So I will share with you an article on the front page of the Indian Express today by Harish Tamodran, who's got a story saying exactly that. So please see the article. I will share a link with you. In fact, if you see carefully, then year on year, maybe 1 year, 2023 was not such a good year, but generally you've seen a growth in agricultural exports from either side. In fact, this year, in the first 6 months, Compared to the same 6 months, Jan to June the previous year, American agricultural exports to India are up 49%. And Indian agricultural exports within the same period to America are up 24%. In fact, agricultural trade as it stands now is not unfavorable to India. At this point, India's agricultural exports are more than $6 billion. This year, I would say they are tending towards 6.5 to $7 billion. That much we are exporting to America. American exports to India are this year trending towards about three and a half, I would say $3.5 billion. So not inconsiderable. In fact, quite significant already, except that what comes from the US right now does not affect Indian farmers because none of these is either grown in India or none of these is available in surplus in India. There is a shortage for all of this in India. For example, tree nuts. You see so much California almonds, California pista being sent, California almonds, California other nuts being sold in India. They are being sold under that brand name also. California this, California that. So a lot of the tree nuts. In fact, the largest single item on American agricultural exports to India is tree nuts. So obviously not cashew. India exports cashew. That is 25% about of all of American agricultural exports to India. In fact, as a matter of fact, last year it was more than 25%. This year, because the overall American agricultural exports to India are in any case going up, it might be maybe 23%, 24%. However, as income levels in India go up and as people consume more dry fruit, I suspect that this will go up. On which note, I shall tell you a small story. When Rajiv Gandhi visited the US in 1987, that was not his first visit. First visit was 1985. At his meeting with Ronald Reagan then, on the center table where they were sitting, there were as usual some bowls of nuts, right? So Rajiv Gandhi picked up an almond from the bowl and put it in his mouth and had barely started chewing it when Ronald Reagan said, "When will you allow our nut growers to sell more almonds like this in your country so you can eat these in your country as well?" So there was such a lot of restriction on trade that even the tree nuts that we eat now from the US and all over the world, including Turkey, Afghanistan, Iran, everywhere, even these were not allowed at that point unless these were imported at 200%, 250% kind of tariffs. So we've come a long distance since then. Right now, it's more than $1 billion worth only from the US. Then there is ethanol, which is the second item. Ethanol, soybean oil, cotton. All three are generally about $500 million worth as they are trending. So together, all of this will maybe reach $4 billion in any case this year, trade deal or no trade deal. And ethanol, we are using ethanol to make alcohol-based chemicals and also for some medicines. Americans want us to import it for fuel purposes also, for blending with fuel. That is not something that is hurting Indian farmers. That, if anything, will help reduce your petroleum imports just a little bit. Soybean oil. So we import soybean oil from all over the world, and that's where a big hypocrisy comes in. The big issue with agriculture is not that if India opens out to American soybeans, Indian farmers will be damaged. Indian farmers grow too little soybean. Too few Indian farmers grow soybean, and what they grow has very poor yield. So India is really short of soybean for animal feed and soybean oil. So we are importing billions, several billions dollars worth of soybean oil from other countries in the world. Most of which comes out of GM seeds. The big soybean growing countries in the world, we had said in an earlier Katta Clutter on edible oil imports or edible oil shortages, we called it the other oil. All the major countries that grow soybean oil have gone GM. The US, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, most of Africa is now going GM. South Africa, the left liberal South Africa has opened out to GM. Even the Chinese 3 years back started growing soybean oil. So all this soybean oil we are importing is in any case GM. Nevertheless, There is no treatment, there is no injection, there is no vaccine, there is no pill for Ludditism and paranoia. We are caught with that one. I thought I will get this off my chest as well. Seafood is trending to about 3 billion this year. That is again something, as I just said, that will affect a lot of jobs in India. Now you see Trump's tariffs. So Trump's tariffs, if you look at the 15 top countries trading with America, America has a total trade deficit of nearly $700 billion, of which $300 billion is with the Chinese. The Chinese now have what we had noted in an earlier cut the clutter, of which we should share a link with you. The Chinese now have reached a trade surplus of $1 trillion, And the fact is, in spite of all the tariffs that have come in, and this whole move of China plus one, China's trade surplus, the data now tells us, has only gone up. So America's trade deficit with China is 300 billion. That's more than 40 billion of all of America's trade deficit with the rest of the world. With India, it's only 40%. India, on the other hand, has a $110 billion trade deficit with China. That's a story for another day. We'll talk about that. The top 15 countries that the US trades with, they account for 74% of all of America's trade. All of them have been hit with fresh tariffs now, and of the 15, it's only against 2 that the Americans have a surplus. One is with UK, about 15 billion, and second is with Netherlands. Netherlands a little bit complicated because there's a big port there through which a lot of billing takes place to a lot of other countries. That's why figures for Netherlands for trade always seem a little bit surprisingly high or exaggerated. If you just go by tariffs, these are the pre-secondary tariffs on India. Brazil, 50%. So we are now the same place as Brazil. Syria, I checked the data. I cannot find anything in records that shows me any trade between America and Syria. In fact, the last instance I even asked Grok and ChatGPT. The last instance even they found of American trade with Syria is probably 2010. Around the time of Arab Spring. That is about $300 million. But Trump just looked at the map of the world and even tariffed a tiny island which only has penguins living there. And since then, a whole website and a whole Instagram page and YouTube channel has come up of the Penguin Republic. So maybe Syria is like that. Poor Myanmar, 40%. What can they buy from the Americans? I don't think the M16 rifles they bought from the Americans. There is a free arms bazaar in that area. Laos, poor Laos, 40%. And then Switzerland, 39%. And that's the important one. Switzerland, what's his problem with Switzerland? Nevertheless, he's now imposed 39% on Switzerland. And Swiss President Karin Keller-Sutter, she actually landed up in Washington. She could not get an appointment with Trump, a prior appointment, so she landed up in Washington in the hope that she will get to meet him. She spent 2.5 days or maybe 3 in Washington, could not meet Donald Trump, or he would not meet her. He would not meet the Swiss president, a woman president. She, the highest ranked American official she could meet was Secretary of State and went back from there. So that's the kind of chaos Trump's tariff policy has caused. This has hit his allies, a friend like India, near ally like India, allies like the Europeans, like the Japanese, like the South Koreans, who already had a free trade agreement signed in his first term. Australia, he hasn't given time yet to the Australian Prime Minister, member of Quad, and his adversaries, is gone after. He's going after Putin. He's gone after China. Now he's also talking about talking to China. He's also hit countries like Myanmar, Laos, Syria that are non-existent, immaterial as far as trade with America is concerned. At the same time, he hasn't even spared the country that defines neutrality in the world. In fact, if you say somebody is neutral, you say so and so follows Swiss neutrality. So allies, adversaries, neutrals, it's the same kind of shock and awe that Trump is delivering on the rest of the world. That said, I will now have Keshav join in with me to explain a couple of the intricacies on how to understand this Trump order and what it might mean in terms of when it comes into effect and what happens when and what happens to what. So Keshav, you made a close reading of this. I tried reading this, and I must say the American bureaucracy, when it comes to obtuse writing and for creating complexities out of what should be simple, right, are way better or worse, depending on how you see it, way better or worse than Indian bureaucracy. So you've read this. Tell me, in this list, from this order, how do you find out what is going to be tariffed and what will not be?
It's very simple. What will not be tariffed, the exemption, is based on HS codes or harmonized system codes.
Harmonized system. That
And-
is called HS code.
Yes, and this is an internationally recognized code. So all countries have similar codes. In his original April 2nd executive order, that is Executive Order 14257, there is lists, pages and pages of HS codes that you can see here, which comes under Annex 2, which is exempted. Apart from this, there's another line which he adds, that those that are under Section 232 investigations, such as semiconductors, critical minerals, these are also exempted. So these
For
are
now.
for now. So these are the two specific exemptions that you will find in the.
And otherwise, all the others in that list, in that Annexure 2 in his April 22 order, are exempted.
Yes.
So you now have to read his order and then see all the stuff that India exports, and then strike out what features in that list. And you've done that.
Yes. The thing is that because of the chaos that you mentioned, there are multiple things that you need to realize. So apart from just the April 2nd order, on April 11th, he came out with another amendment which says that smartphones are now exempt, and that he's given a specific HS code. So that is on the 11th of April. And so the new order on 6th of August refers to that, as well as says that you now have new tariffs of 25% on top. So he has multiple different documents from different agencies that give you a broader picture of the exemption.
And this is beginning to sound like India's Income Tax Act, right, which has more amendments than the original law.
Yes.
So he is amending as he's going along, but also retaining what he had said earlier.
Yes.
That's a challenge. Now, what is this intricacy that you got 21 days, but then he mentions August 27, but it's not as if this is everything that lands in America by August 27. August 27, but it's not as if something has to land in America by August 27 for it to escape these additional tariffs. What happens now?
So basically the 21 days from this says that till 27th of August, any additional items that are shipped to America, these tariffs will not be imposed. But there's a second line to that order, which also gives a grace period till the 17th of September. So if something leaves an Indian port on the 26th of August, 11:59 p.m., it has time till 17th of September to reach the US and be cleared by customs, so that the additional tariffs will not be imposed.
Yeah. And when we say shipping, shipping means you could even be putting it on you could even be sending it by air freight. Shipping is just a generic thing for sending it out. Anything that leaves an Indian port on the 27th will reach an American port on September 17. Now, what we don't know is what happens if the Houthis decide it will not reach. So maybe there is an Houthi exception also. That will not need a Trump executive order, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Yes. So that's basically the idea, is that he's given a grace period, but also it must be noted that you have till 27th and then a grace period till 17th. And in usual Trump fashion, that gives Indian negotiators a time, maybe. So that's how you see his executive orders are consistently giving that time for people to negotiate.
Yeah, because he can always conjure up a new HS code,
Yes.
isn't it? This is just a number. And remember that before this deadline, the US trade negotiating team is scheduled to come to India. So far, so good. There is no change in that schedule. And I would say, I read in places that one reason some of the delays took place from the Indian side was that the Indian side said that Parliament session is on, so they can't focus or they can't stay on. I hope they had finished it in time and maybe by that August 1 deadline. But then again, you can never be sure. Did Trump actually want to finish it in time for that or not?
Yes.
Thank you, Keshav. That was very helpful. Now I can promise you this story will stay with us. You'll be called upon multiple times in months to come as Trump keeps on throwing more clutter at us.